I wanted to talk about this lawsuit. There are two Christian couples who are suing the state of Vermont because officials there said we cannot place foster children inside your homes because you will not treat them well. And they're saying that's religious discrimination. Okay. And here is the lawsuit they're filing here. And you could see at the top who are the plaintiffs. It's two couples, Brian and Caitlin Waddy, I think that's how you pronounce it, and Michael and Rebecca Gant. And they're basically suing these Vermont officials. It's a federal lawsuit. And what this is all about, they're saying, is like these couples are foster parents. They have taken in foster children in the past. As far as I can tell, there were never any issues with it. But recently, the Vermont Department for Children and Families revoked their foster care licenses because they said we're not accommodating trans kids or LGBTQ kids in any way. And what happened is that they were actually fine under the old system. But a couple of years ago, Vermont updated its policies to say anyone who wanted to be a foster parent had to be accepting of LGBTQ people. And what that means in practice is you have to affirm those kids by using their pronouns and allowing them to dress in accordance with their gender expression. Basic stuff. That does not mean, oh, your kid says, I don't want my private parts anymore and they have to get surgery. That's not what this is about. It's saying if we put someone in your care and they tell you they are gay, you can't tell them, no, you're not. Let's take you to a church so you can be exorcised. Like, no, you can't do that. You have to accept them for who they are. And the couple's attorneys at the right-wing hate group Alliance Defending Freedom, here's how they put it in response. They said, no, that's not religious bigotry. The couples expressed their religiously inspired and widely held belief that girls cannot become boys or vice versa, which again, that's not what being trans is. That's not how it works. So that's just a straight up lie. So that's why they're suing. The state updated its policies. They don't like the policies. There you go. So here's the thing. Vermont's policies, they are sound. If children placed in the care of these couples happen to be trans, their homes would not be a safe place for those children to live. Or to put that another way, the state didn't reject these couples because they are Christian. They rejected the couples because they are bigots. Christianity is just the excuse they are using to justify their bigotry. That's what's going on here. And it is the state's obligation to make sure children in the foster care system, who already probably have a ton of stuff they are dealing with, you have to place them with families that will love and care for them unconditionally. And listen, that is a hard thing to do. I have so much respect for couples who adopt and take in foster children because it's so not easy. It's not easy with biological children, but it's really hard when it comes to fostering and adoption and all that stuff. And these parents are coming out and saying, yeah, but we can't help certain kids. Well, fine, but then you don't get to be on the list. It's not complicated. Here's the specifics of the lawsuit here, okay? Check this out. This is in the lawsuit that the couples filed. Look at number 188. They said a person from Vermont's department came to their home to do the assessment. Following the visit, the Waddies were asked to complete a form asking them to rate on a scale from 1 to 5 whether they felt equipped to care for children with certain characteristics. One of the statements read, "My family would be accepting and supportive of an LGBTQ foster child." The Waddies chose a 3. They felt they were a 5 in terms of loving and supporting any child, regardless of the policies, but they did not write 5 for fear that the department would interpret it to mean they would support anything a child said or believed about their sexual or gender identity. So they're like openly admitting, yeah, I mean, we love kids, but not in that situation, which seems like kind of a giveaway, right? There was another thing in the uh, same section, which I found interesting. This is the same couple here. Katie responded that while she and her husband considered themselves a 5, she realized that some people might mischaracterize their religious views as not sufficiently accepting. Yeah, because that's true. But look at this. Katie went on to share her personal experience with same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria, and how she was thankful her family did not treat her like the opposite sex because she eventually grew out of her discomfort. I have so many questions about this single statement. Like, okay, she liked other girls. What does that mean exactly? Was she in relationships with them? Did she like one day have a crush? Because you can have a crush on another woman and not be a lesbian. Maybe she's bisexual. Maybe she can't admit that to herself. I don't know. But this other one, she's like, I used to have gender dysphoria. What does that mean? Does that mean one day, like when you were a kid, you put on a baseball cap backwards and you played in the mud and you had a good time with your friends? Because, like, if you're a proverbial tomboy, that's not what we're talking about here. And that's what I want to know. Like, she says, listen, I used to be gay and I used to be trans and I grew out of it. So these kids can too. That's what she's getting at. It's like, I don't think you were either of those. And I wish I knew more because I've been thinking about this every day for the past week. Okay, so that's the first couple. That's what they're saying in their defense, as if all of this is good stuff. What about the other couple? Here's what they said. Uh, number 238 here. Murphy, who works with the state of Vermont, asked Brian a set of questions, including whether the Gants would take a child to a pride parade and whether the Gants would use a child's chosen name or stated pronouns. Brian answered these questions candidly. Again, these are his lawyers, Brian's lawyers, saying this. While they would love and support any child, they could not use pronouns, attend pride parades, or say or do anything to encourage a child to reject their biological sex and God given identity. And then look at this. This gets even more specific. When Murphy asked Brian about gender specific haircuts, like could a girl get short hair if she wanted to, Brian responded he was unsure how to answer. Foster parents are not permitted to change a child's hair without the biological parent's permission. Like Brian Murphy then told Brian he would begin the process of revoking their license. Like these people can't even just say like, yeah, the kid can get the haircut they want. I'm not going to say I support it. Like what the hell is going on here? So the bottom line is even if these two Christian couples are fine on paper in every other area, they are not okay in this particular area. And that is a deal breaker for the state of Vermont. That's kind of the end of the story. And I know some people are like really frustrated by that because there are always children who need homes, whether you got to adopt them or in the foster care system. Those kids need a place to go. And there are also these couples and parents who are saying, we will take them in. And you would think if you have this and you have this, why not put them together? But the state's obligation, you got to understand this, the state's obligation is to protect the kids, even if that means not placing them in someone else's custody, even when those people seem willing and claim they are able to do it. And how did Alliance Defending Freedom spin this? They're treating this like Vermont doesn't care about the kids. Vermont's foster care system is in crisis. There aren't enough families to care for vulnerable kids and children born with drug dependencies have nowhere to call home. Yet Vermont is putting its ideological agenda ahead of the needs of these suffering kids, said an attorney for ADF. Like, no, the Vermont is not putting ideology ahead of everything else. These couples are putting ideology ahead of everything else. So, like, what the hell? And it's also very hard to take ADF seriously, this right-wing group, when they complain about, like, we have to care for the needs of the suffering. This is the same group responsible for the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe and the subsequent suffering of pregnant people throughout the country. They don't give a damn about who suffers as long as it's other people that they don't care about. Like, as long as their Christian-fueled hate takes precedence, they don't care who gets hurt. So ADF's lawsuit, it paints these couples as heroes, as sympathetic, like the men are pastors, and they just hold these traditional religious beliefs about human sexuality, which is their euphemism for being bigots and all this stuff. And I wanted to show you this too. Also in the lawsuit, look at this. For the Waddies and the Gants express these and other views in their homes and with their children. They want to do so. This is talking about Christianity. They want to do so in non-coercive ways, such as sharing their religious views that God created humans, male and female, over the dinner table, if their children are willing to hear them, which is a very weird thing to put in your own lawsuit because, like, what they're saying is we totally want to proselytize to the kids who are placed in our care, um, until they tell us they don't want to hear it, which puts the burden on the kids, these foster children, to tell these people who took them in, can you please shut up? Like a 12-year-old who's been through hell and back, who finally has a place to go now, is not going to tell the parents to just stop talking about Jesus. That's unfair to place on the kids. And these parents are like, we just want to preach. We just want to take these kids in and make them targets for our proselytizing. We don't give a shit what they want. But if they tell us no, we'll respect it. Well, one, it's not their job to tell you no, just don't do it. And second, like, aren't you basically admitting all you care about is preaching your religion and not interested in what the kids need or want? So, anyway, this is why the state took away their licenses. Again, Vermont's not punishing them for Christianity because there's literally no evidence that Vermont is not placing kids in the home of Christian families. There's no religious discrimination in place here. These couples, even if they made the cut in the past, they don't make the cut anymore because the standards are higher and they're not good enough. That's the bottom line. I was reminded there are sometimes, like, there were cases going to the Supreme Court of like a white high school student who couldn't get into a college of her choice. And then she blamed affirmative action because she was just mediocre and didn't get in. It's like, yeah, you weren't good enough. That's why you didn't get in. Stop blaming everyone else because you're inadequate. Um, Anyway, it's not just about LGBTQ things either. The lawsuit that they filed says things like, due to their Christian beliefs, Brian and Katie cannot say or do anything that contradicts their faith, which is a weird thing to say as well, because you know what a lot of fundamentalist Christian parents want to do? If their kids are acting up, they want to physically abuse them, right? Spare the rod, spoil the child. Well, what happens if Vermont says you can't beat your kids? I don't care if they're being punished for something. I don't care if you're trying to discipline them. No, you can't physically abuse them. Are these parents going to come back and say, like, well, it's my religion. You can't tell me no to that? Like, the point is, religion cannot be used as an immunity against bad behavior. Like, stop using your religion as an excuse to get away with things good parents would not get away with. Like, that's what this lawsuit does over and over. It praises the couples, tells you their qualifications, which no one's arguing about. They seem perfectly capable parents for kids who are not LGBTQ. And even then, like, I would argue, well, they're still not good parents because even if you're cis and straight, you still don't want parents who have these feelings about LGBTQ people. But that's precisely why they should not be taking in foster kids currently in the state's care. The state has an obligation to respect anti-discrimination laws and protect LGBTQ kids, even if these Christian parents don't give a damn about them. Imagine this for a second. Imagine if the state placed trans children in the homes of these Christian parents. And then because of their bigotry, those children later committed self-harm. There would be an outcry against the state for knowingly placing those kids in harm's way in these Christian homes, in a home that was never going to accept them. And even if the odds of all that happening are very minimal, the government's job is to prevent that from ever happening in the first place. And if you know these couples are not going to accept trans children, then the state was right to reject their applications. It's not that complicated. It's not an attack on their faith. It's an attack on bigotry, which is exactly what you want the state to be doing. The couple doesn't care about the kids' best interests. They are selfish. They only care about their religion and nothing else. They can't accept the fact that they're just not good enough to do this job. It doesn't matter that they took in foster children in the past. They are not good enough anymore. And given how vulnerable these kids may be who come into their care, like, even in the best of circumstances, you want more support, not less. Doesn't necessarily mean ADF is going to lose this case, though, because this is a federal lawsuit, which means it's going to hit federal judges. Some of them are Trump-appointed judges. That's possible. And if it ever got up to the Supreme Court, you know exactly how this would turn out. Like, so I don't know that this means that they'll be able to get away with what they're doing. They might. If Vermont was actually discriminating against Christians, that would actually be an outrage. And church-state separation groups would fight against it. But that is not what is happening. These people are just pretending to be persecuted. And I think I appreciated this one statement from someone working with the state of Vermont's system here. In a statement, that person wrote, "It bears mentioning that ADF's lawsuit had been filed at the start of June, which is celebrated as the month of Pride. LGBTQI youth in foster care have higher than average rates of substance abuse, human trafficking, and suicide," she added, "and the state's policies are meant to help improve these outcomes. It is a human right for all to be valued and supported, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. The Family Services Division is here to serve all and upholds that expectation for both its staff as well as the foster parents who agree to take on the care of the youth in our custody." That is what a loving person says. And that is not what the Christian parents are saying. That is the point. That is the sort of love that the Waddies and the Gants do not understand, and no one at ADF understands. And they refuse to understand it because their Christian faith commands them to do the opposite. So I hope they lose this case. I hope Vermont wins. It would be better for the foster children, but this is not religious discrimination. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a bit, and I will take questions there. What do we got here? The whole foster care system needs to be reworked. It's a mess. I won't pretend to be an expert on it. I'll take your word that it needs to be reworked. I'm sure this is true of pretty much any government agency, right? Let's put more resources to help these government agencies. But one reason it doesn't get the resources and finances that it needs is usually because religious people, conservatives, Republicans, hate funding the government to do things like this. They would rather fund like private Christian ministries to do this work so they can be bigots. So yeah, I agree with you. The system probably does need a lot of help. You could say this about public schools too. What they need is more public funding, which is the one thing they're not going to get with Republicans in charge at the state level, at the federal level, or anything like that. As someone who wishes he could adopt a kid or two, fuck anyone who would refuse to affirm and support their adopted LGBTQ plus kid. Got nothing to add to that. I agree. Yeah, man, if you can adopt or take in foster kids, it's an incredible thing to do. I have some acquaintances who have done that. It takes a lot out of them, but man, those kids are so much better off when they are in loving homes, and those kids especially need them. You know what's funny about that? I'll tell you, go back to that for a second, Dan. Quick story here. Way back in the day, you may remember there's a group called Focus on the Family, Christian evangelical horrible organization. It was founded by James Dobson, who has no good advice for raising kids. But many, many years ago, he stepped down. He said, "I'm basically retiring." And Focus on the Family brought in a new guy to lead the organization. And the question was, is this guy going to be as much of a culture warrior as James Dobson was throughout his life? And well, we didn't necessarily know. And that guy, the new guy, happened to be speaking at a church not far from where I live shortly after he got appointed. So I signed up for the free event, and I'm like, I want to go listen to what this guy has to say. And the amazing thing was when Jim Daly is the guy's name, when he spoke at the time, I thought this is not bad because I think he said, I could be wrong here. I think he said something like he was adopted as a child. He never knew his parents. And the couple that took him in, maybe they were Christian. So he has a big spot in his heart for adoption and things like that. And one of the things I remember him saying is he wanted Focus on the Family to really go all in and use their resources to help Christian families take in more children, adoption, through foster care. And I thought for a second, I'm like, that sounds like a really good message. And even if these are proselytizing parents, like this idea that instead of fighting culture war battles, we should work on taking in children who need loving homes, like that would be really hard for me to condemn as an atheist. You know what I mean? And then, of course, it didn't last long because Focus on the Family under the new guy is still as bigoted as the old guy was. But for a second there, it's like if more Christians did the thing he was saying on like day one when he became president, like it would be really hard to criticize them because that's a really good thing to do. But of course, that's not what they put all their resources in doing. They are still fighting they're still spreading lies about gay kids and trans kids and all that stuff. There's also a widely held belief kids and other people should not get medical attention and just pray for them to get better. Yeah, I mean, this is the gay conversion therapy, right? Like, you don't need any help. You don't need any affirmation for sure. Just pray away the gay. If you pray, you won't be trans anymore, whatever it is. Like, uh, and not all those kids need medical attention, but people just think, oh, you like someone of the same sex? Why don't you just pray on it? And then you'll get married when you're 14, just like good Christians. If trans folk were to start a religion, would that be allowed? Would that be allowed? It would afford would it afford religious freedoms and tax exemption? Oh, so if trans people started a religion, would they get religious benefits, tax exemptions, and all that? I believe the truth. Yes. I mean, this is true of all nonprofit groups, whether you're the Satanic Temple, an atheist group, what have you. If you're starting a nonprofit and that includes religious groups, yeah, you get the benefits of churches or non-religious organizations. So, I mean, yes, sounds like a kick-ass religion. If I was a foster kid, I feel like I'd suffer much, much more being under someone who couldn't accept me as I am. Literally, would be more emotional trauma. Yeah, and that's Vermont's position on this. These kids are going through enough. We do not want to add to their misery. We want them to be in loving homes. It's not a lot to ask. And yet, for these Christian couples, it's like, nope, sorry, too much. You're asking us to love these kids? Sorry, not what we signed up for. Everyone I knew growing up has left the Catholic Church, so we technically got the last laugh. Yep, and that's not over. They're still leaving.